Okay, gentlemen, Dr. Lombardi, thanks for joining us. Pat Gebhart, football tournament director for the PIAA, now in your third year?
Yes.
Doing that?
Yep.
Also
Yep.
associate executive director. Just some of these questions are questions that we routinely get throughout the season, some by parents, some by coaches, some by just disgruntled people overall. But they do come fast and furious during the season, so I thought it would be a good time as the PIAA championships are going on right now. We're currently in between the 1A final and the 4A final at Cumberland Valley's Chapman Field. So we thought we'd go through with them. You guys are gracious enough to give your time, so thank you very much. Doc, you know I've been around a while, as have you, and a lot of these questions seem to pop up year after year. Football, of course, dominates a lot of the conversation when it's dealing with what the PIAA is and does and how it operates. Out of the gate, I wanted to ask both of you, what's the biggest sort of issues facing the PIAA as we move into the new year?
Well, I would say, as always, no different than any of our other 51 state associations.
Right.
Everyone wants to find a solution to the transfer rule. And the transfer rule then dovetails or merges into a separation of public or private, and those issues just will never go away, and sometimes they have peaks and valleys based on who wins. Mm-hmm. When it's more one-sided for a group that is loud, then they're happy. When it's more one-sided that the other group is loud, then they're happy. But there's not a state in the country that has figured it out. As you well know, much like New York and Maryland, our counterparts, they're public school associations, and we were too, until 1972 when the legislation was written and changed. And that's the law that we follow. If the law changes again, we'll follow it. But until that, we're going to adhere to the law.
It does seem, too, like the issue or the problem is speeding up. Is that accurate to say? It almost seems like, with obviously the advancement of the transfer portal in college, which seems to get heavier and heavier every single year. Just the last couple of days, Dan and I were talking about how many kids are jumping into the portal just in the last few days. Has that problem advanced? Has it become more pronounced?
Well, I think it gets a little louder because there has been people in the General Assembly that have looked at a resolution. That's not legislation. That's sort of an easy way to try to make us do something that is contrary to law. And we know that there's a group out there just waiting. If we try to do something, that will take us to court, and we will probably lose on equal protection automatically. So, we're not interested in going to court and losing, but we're also interested in trying to do our best to have competitive balance, thus vis-a-vis our competitive formula. And we have spent an awful lot of time in the last 6 years trying to develop one that works, and now we are in the phase of reevaluating what we've done for the first 6 years, and that no different than the transfer rule is evolving. And we have some real major changes that we just passed yesterday at the board meeting that I think will have a significant impact on the competitive balance in each class. However, that is working, as illustrated by schools right here in our area that have gone up. They've still done very well in the new classifications, such as winning either a district championship or advancing not only in the state playoffs, but also to a championship game. So that says to me the formula is working, because even by moving up, there's still success.
Right. We spoke about venues. This is one we get a lot. Cumberland Valley, obviously third year now, hosting state championships. How, how satisfied are you guys that this is, at least for this time period, is the right place for the football championships? Because the campus obviously has really become the epicenter for championships in fall sports.
Pat, I'd like to call on you since Pat handles the tournament, and let Pat give you some of the things that he has dealt with.
Yeah, I think the football being the culminating event of the fall festival of our championships, which started back a few weeks ago where we had soccer, volleyball, and field hockey all here at Cumberland Valley at the same weekend, and now we're finishing off with football. I don't think we'd be happier with Cumberland Valley. You ask them something and it's reasonable, they're happy to make it happen for you. The venue is top of the line. Just the amenities and facilities that not only the teams get to use and the spectators, but also the officials. It's a much different environment than we had previously, and it gives everyone involved the feel that it is a championship event. Mm-hmm. It's probably polished more than maybe what it was before. So.
I know one of the issues, considering with Hershey as the financial end, has it been good financial fit for PIAA too?
Yes.
Here?
Yes, it's been much more favorable. We've also had the involvement of the Cumberland Valley Convention Visitors Bureau that has also been helpful. But the administration here, from the superintendent to the business manager Mike Craig and Darnell and Colette and Vince at operations, they've been second to none in how they've opened their doors to us. And you folks have experienced it in the past. You're accommodated. You have a place to go. You have a place to work. It's warm. It's clean. Mm-hmm. You have food. You have the ability to come and go. You can interview coaches. Coaches have their own coaches room. They have their own athletic training room. They have their own locker room for each and every student. Then they have the indoor facility to warm up with in inclement weather, to get outside. I mean, the A to Z, the things that people don't even see, the entrance areas for fans to get in, the ease of entry. It has been fabulous, and our fall festival was a huge success. So we're very, very happy here.
Yeah, and on the topic of venues too, kind of going a little back in time in this bracket, sort of, we get asked about all the time, especially because this is kind of when our area in particular has to travel more, is when the neutral sites are kind of starting to get secured and people wait until that Saturday, that Sunday to see where their favorite team is going to be playing. And then you're like, oh, why is it a 30-minute drive for one team and an hour for another team? Has it become more difficult to secure sites? Can you kind of take fans through kind of what that process has been like? Because it's not always just as simple as open up a Google Maps, I assume, and saying, hey, this is let's pinpoint halfway through.
Right. That's probably where we start, to be honest with you. Just looking at a map and trying to find, okay, they're 200 miles apart. Let's find a high school that's 100 miles from each. And that would be great if, bang, there was high school ABC, and guess what? They're available, and they haven't winterized for the year, and they have turf, and they have seating for 1,500, and they have bath, and all those things that go into a quality championship type facility, which are things that we require. Mm-hmm. And turf, it could be one of the stumbling blocks for certain venues that would be midway that we want to play on turf. We just feel it's appropriate for teams that they're all district champions. It's a champions tournament, so we want to treat them as such. So it would be great if we had those sites, but once we don't have that site at that 100-mile mark. Okay, now what do? We have to find another school along that route or somewhere near that route. We don't want people going out of their way or teams going out of their way just to find a site. But if we can find one that's near midway, that's where we'll go. Yeah. So we have our district chairs identify schools all across the Commonwealth that would be available to host if their site would be one of those near midway sites. The problem is some of these schools that are near midway, maybe their football team has not played for several weeks. Well, they probably winterized their stadium, and that's what happened this year. Many of those midway sites just were shut down, and they were winterized and were not available. Mm-hmm. So then we have to go off that 100-mile mark, and it might tilt toward one team or another. That's only because that is the closest school we have that would be closest to midway.
And it's not just a football issue. This is something that you guys have kind of had to, navigate through every single sport, right?
That's correct.
Yeah.
Every sport. I'd asked Pat to explain the change we had this year in the first round, and we were at home site.
Yeah.
And Pat maybe you want to take them through those next
Sure.
couple rounds.
Yeah, last year we had the first 2 rounds. The first round, the quarterfinal round, could be played at the home site of the team at the top of the bracket.
Mm-hmm.
As long as the 2 teams competing were either in the East or were in the West, or if their districts were East and West but were contiguous. So use 3 and 5 as an example, and that's the one example involving the Mid-State where Steel High went to District 5 to play because
Mm-hmm.
those districts are contiguous, they touch. So,
Mm-hmm.
but otherwise, there would be a midway site. If they're not in the East or the West, both, or contiguous, we would try to find a midway site. And you often see that in the later rounds where we end up in Altoona when we have a District 3 team playing a team from District 7 in Pittsburgh. That's the really the optimal site to go to.
Yeah.
And to piggyback on that, this year our first round, the team at the top of the pairing was the home team, so they had the ability to host. That was a little change. Why? Because we're in a new cycle.
Right.
Last year was the end of the old cycle, and that's where we had 2, because the previous year was the first year of that cycle, and we didn't want to change in the middle where we allowed both teams in the pairing, because you're at the top the one year, then the other district's the top the other year. We would take that away from them in the middle of the cycle. So we waited till the break of the new cycle and only went 1 round. The other thing that I wish the folks would, the general public would know, colleges and universities do not want us. Just because a college exists, we cannot go there.
Mm-hmm.
One, they don't want us. And the reason they don't want us is because our people, when they get on campus, don't usually act very well. And there's damage. And they're like, we have to take care of these students that are paying our tuition first, whether it's a rec program or their intercollegiate program, that's first. And then we become the next choice. And a lot of them, as Pat said, they'll winterize or they'll have their college winners programs already started. They don't want us.
Well, we've run into basketball now, even in high school venues. The first weekend of basketball, if there's a tournament, they're not going to host a football game the same night they're in a basketball tournament. So that's just another roadblock for us to try to overcome.
Yeah, it's a difficult issue, I know, for you guys. Pat, you had mentioned East-West part of planning out and finding venues. People have suggested to me that they would like to go back to true East-West brackets. Is that a possibility with how we are today, with 6 classifications and basing those classifications on enrollment? Is that even possible to create, a bracket maybe where there isn't multiple bye weeks for some districts, without something massive happening like a redistricting of the state, or even going to a true regional setup for postseason? Is that even plausible? Is that something that could possibly be down the road?
No, I think under the current form of our classification, it'd be difficult to do because the larger schools are all tilted toward the southeastern portion of the state. And when you have that, I don't know how you could do true East-West where the majority of the schools are in the East, the bigger schools.
Yeah.
So that'd be.
You really only have 8, maybe 6 in Whitfield, maybe 2 McDowell. Out of Erie, you've only got like 8 on the west side.
Bergen State College, and that's it.
Right. With District 6 would go there, so maybe 10. Right. Whereas opposed you have, District 3 alone has more than that.
And let's just use our illustration of today.
Yeah.
You have 2 teams that are generally from the West.
Right.
That are playing in the championship game because one had to come through the Eastern bracket because the tilted of those smaller schools in the A and AA classification are West. Or Central compared to the East. So,
has there been any discussion about? I know, Doc, you and I talked a lot back in 2015, 2016 when the 8 scenarios for moving up, for adding classifications, and I was a big proponent for the super class, 5 classes in a super class, and I thought we would get somewhere around 40, 42 super class teams. Do you guys are always on the lookout for possible changes to the 6 classes? Personally, I think the 6 classes worked out pretty well, but are you guys always looking for the next, avenue of change in that department, or is it something that has to be kind of drastically gone wrong with what you have currently?
No, I think the best way to answer that is, yes, we look at that annually. At the end of every sports season, every one of our sports has a steering committee meeting. They have representatives from each of our 12 districts, along with our statewide rules interpreters and coaches representatives that meet in the office with us or via Zoom, and we review everything from soup to nuts of that football season or soccer or volleyball, field hockey. We do it in every sport. And we look at bracketing and we look at proportional representation. And the super class, the reason we fell on 6 was because it was the most equal representation and the closest way to keep schools of like-sized school competing against each other. I know there's people that don't like the 6. It is the most equitable, and it has been a huge success. Just ask some of those A, AA, and AAA schools that would have never had the opportunity to be in a state championship that have thrived on that.
Yeah.
But the super class, I think, which was kind of proposed that it ended up dying, was 6+1.
Yeah.
And that was modeled a little bit from some other states that we talked to, where they took schools of really large or very, very successful and put them in a group by themselves. I still think that has some merit. That's just Bob Lombardi talking. I'm not talking for the board or the steering committee. Because I think there's some ways you can do it. The problem is there's so few schools to make that a bona fide tournament. But that's something that might evolve. No different than what we do in everything here. It's a work in progress every year. So is it off the table? No. It's always on discussion.
Speaking of the work in progress, you kind of mentioned it earlier about the competitive balance rule. Obviously, that's something that I'm sure you're aware of has not been the most universally popular thing among people, but it's something that has, since 2018, right, has been kind of just in there and has become pretty much a staple of what you guys do. And like you said, we've kind of seen the results play out and see that it really hasn't, made that much of a, drastic change one way or the other. But what kind of changes are on the horizon in regards to that competitive balance? Because I'm sure when you guys hear criticism about stuff like that, it's not going completely one ear out the other. You guys are trying to kind of tweak things and see if there's any merit to the criticisms.
Sure. We met yesterday, and Pat can fill in the blanks here. We looked at, we made the board passed on the third reading, changing the number of points to move up from 6 to 7. The feeling on the board was you should be getting to a state championship game. We had found over the past 6 years, with 6, you could identify somebody that gets only to 2 semifinals, never plays in the championship game, that would end up moving up. And then we found that you'd have somebody that could play in a championship game and not have others and then not move up. So that caused a little bit of a rift. So that is going to now move to 7. We also looked at the way of the number of transfers that would be lost. And we came up, the staff, really championed by Mark Byers, came up with a formula that said, let's look at the number of players that it takes to start a game, and then take half of that. So it's even-handed across the board. It's even-handed in basketball as it is in football. So what we came up with was, like the illustration of football would be half of 11 starters. You need 11 to start the game by rule book. Is 5.5. Well, you can't have half a player, so we'll round down to 5. Well, 5 is up from 3. That seemed to be tasty for the board. They seem to like that. So that is on the table and past the first reading. We also are looking at the number of points to stay. We're also looking at the number of help me out, Pat. What did I miss here?
I was thinking of what was removed from the motion. I wasn't thinking.
We also looked at, on a first reading, passing in the competition formula an exception for transfers. Maybe you wouldn't count a transfer if a family had to move for reasons that are totally unavoidable and out of their control. The same type of language that's already in the postseason parameter, and that would be consistent language, because we're hearing that people sometimes have to move, but they're counted as transfer because a transfer is a transfer, and there should be a possible exception clause. This would be our exception clause. And we also took a look at some other language on how to deal with not only the exceptional transfer, but the foreign exchange kid that's only eligible for 1 year. Should that count? And our board said those kids that are in a foreign exchange program that sign on to get 1 year would not count as a transfer. So there have been tweaks, and there still are more. I'm sorry I don't have my board minutes.
It's all right.
There's a few I've missed here. I know I gave them to Mike White and Chris Harlan last night after our meeting. But we're trying to see if this is a little more tasty for the schools, because we believe it has worked. And what we're not hearing from are the schools that have not moved up, but the teams that have been successful at that level have moved out of that class. And those schools are going, hey, this is pretty good. This is pretty good. And as illustrated, look at LS. They've never been here. It's a good thing.
I think there's 5 or 6 who have never been here this year.
And to me, that says it works.
Just a couple more quick questions, and we'll get you out of here. Obviously, a big topic a lot of people like bringing up too is the boundary versus non-boundary stuff. Have there been any current discussions kind of with that topic, or is that kind of been tabled?
Boundary and non-boundary, that nomenclature was shot down by our private school steering committee in 2012. And the reason being, it was just a ruse for saying private versus public. And no one wants to violate the legislation. So we've walked away from that. That's why we've gotten into the area of competitive balance through a competition formula and the use of transfers. In a perfect world, the competition formula may be best served by just on success. No different than ASA, softball, or whatever. You win, you go up. But our schools have said, we think that there's some people reloading, there's some people enticing. I don't want to use that R word, but it's out there. But that's not a public or a private school problem. That's a school problem. I can give you A to Z on both sides of the calendar there of people that have been alleged to do a lot of things. However, with that being said, I think it's important to look at what they're trying to achieve with that formula, and the board has felt strongly that transfers need to be part of it to deter that movement. So that's where we are. We're working at it. It's not perfect. I think there's 12 to 15 states across the country that have some type of competitive formula in their classification. Other states have gone to a factor in classification. That hasn't really counted the success. But Ohio has one. Illinois has one. California has one. Ohio's is so intricate. I don't know how to explain it.
We're English majors, not
right.
We don't
not math positions.
And then kind of shifting gears a little bit. 2 years ago, you guys sanctioned girls wrestling, and obviously, I think when we were there last year, pretty overwhelming success, I'd say. We were thrilled. Media day. We had 14 teams. Central PA loves the girls wrestling. We saw how many champions we had. But girls flag football is kind of next in line, right, with the most recent team sport to be sanctioned. And, following it kind of, we saw how much kind of the Steelers and the Eagles, right, were involved. And it feels like kind of those two ends of the state have been heavy in, getting girls flag football sanctioned. Is there a plan to kind of grow the sport in this region as well, in the Central PA region as well? Or are you guys planning more of an organic, hey, people love football everywhere, it's going to kind of get here? Is it a little bit of both? What's kind of the plan for flag football in Central PA and just in the state as a whole?
I don't know if we have a definitive plan on how to grow it just yet. We don't have a rules book. We're going to have a rules book next fall, and then from that point we have to determine how are we going to register officials, Are we going to just adopt the current football officials? I'm not really sure that would probably work, except that with the separate rules book, I think we'd have to have some type of testing in place to make sure that you at least have some knowledge of the rules book. But to grow the sport, I think what you said is probably what is going to happen. I think people are going to realize in the spring it's going to be a spring sport, and you have girls in your school that aren't participating in any spring sport, and let's try flag football. It may be as simple as what we did with lacrosse, where adopted lacrosse, and next thing you know, everyone wanted lacrosse, and that has gone not statewide, but probably 75% of the state, I guess, would have lacrosse, and hopefully girls flag football would be the same.
Yeah. And I'm just piggyback on Pat. Yes, the first step is the rules book. We don't have one.
Yeah.
Some states are playing 5, some places are playing 7. So they're going to try to get their arms around that starting as soon as this January with a committee meeting, develop a rules book for us that we can adopt. And then what we were hoping for timeline-wise is then that's already next school year. That'll be the spring. Get everybody on the same page with the same type of rules. Also, NFHS has a relationship with the NFL. Mm-hmm. You said the Steelers and the Eagles are very involved. The Ravens have been very helpful with Maryland, but the Ravens also participated with the Big 33. Mm-hmm. I know the Bills have a lot of fans in the upper northwest and upper central part of our state. Maybe they will help. We would like to see the NFL give us some, whether it be funding or stuff for our schools, to help grow the game. Mm-hmm. And that's the next step. And then our championship would probably be that following year in the spring. Because
it's probably a little different than girls wrestling, right? Because you had girls kind of wrestling already, and you had some, like here at Cumberland Valley, you had basically de facto teams, right, kind of already. And I'm sure there's some of them around, but
and ours are going to be school-based.
Yeah.
So they're going to have to fall in line with eligibility and health and safety and making sure that everyone has the physical and go through those type of things and academic performance and proficiency and age and all those things. And I think we'll really we would rather take it a year slow and have a super good foundation like we've done with girls wrestling. Mm-hmm. Girls wrestling I don't think is going to go away now because we took the time to get a good foundation. Right. Our fear is we didn't want to jump into this and then all of a sudden it's a flash in the pan that goes away. Yeah. We want to give the young ladies an opportunity to participate because there's a lot of girls out there that really like football that don't have something to do in the spring, and we can attract them and get more participation for our young ladies. We just think it'll be a great thing to do it that way if we do it in a systematic process and a progression to get to the final.
100%.
Doc, Pat, thank you so much for your time. Sure. All you do for student athletes around the state. Yeah. We promised you 20 minutes. It's been 20 minutes. Thank you.
Hey, it's you. We don't.